everyone, and welcome back to another sketchbook tour. So today I'm very happy to show you a sketchbook, an accordion sketchbook I did while I was hiking in Berchtesgaden, or in the Berchtesgadener Land in southeast Germany. And if you've seen any of my other sketchbook tours, you'll know that I tend to do the first page last. So I actually did this map of Germany with Berchtesgaden in relation to the country at the end of my trip after returning to Berlin. And it's just a little way for me to not focus too much on the first page. I know I'll do that last. For a lot of my sketchbooks, I tend to do little calendar pages like this, and it's a way for me to know what's going to go on the first page without spending too much time worrying about, is that sketch going to be good or bad, or is it going to be something predictable? So basically, all the other sketches I did were done on location. And today I'd just like to flip through this sketchbook. It's an accordion sketchbook with two different sides and show you a little bit of the sketches that I did. And since it's been a little while since I did a sketchbook tour, I just wanted to talk with you about the different sketches I did and a few of the stories behind them. So the sketch on our right is a sketch I did while hiking down the Jena mountain. I was actually a bit tired after waking up at 5:15 in the morning, but had seen these alpine cows and just knew I had to sketch them. And it was a beautiful view. We had the Untersberg, which is a mountain on the border of Germany and Austria here in the background or on the horizon. So I just sat for a few minutes and sketched this lovely scenery. Or actually, I shouldn't say a few minutes. I think it was probably a good hour and a half that I spent on this sketch. So the next page of this sketchbook is actually the very first sketch I did after arriving by train to the Berchtesgaden region. And it's of a small little town called Nonn, right outside of Bad Reichenhall. And so I was going on a little walk in the evening, and of course I had my sketchbook supplies with me. And all of a sudden, I just walked out of the woods into this clearing, and I had this beautiful view of these sort of alpine hills. I didn't quite have the mountains yet because they were, behind the hills, but it was still just a gorgeous landscape. And since it was getting close to sunset, it was actually quite yellow in terms of the lighting. But I just sat down for, probably 2.5 hours and really just enjoyed the landscape, took my time and just, sketched the view in front of me. Now the next page is actually a sketchbook spread, as I like to call it, of a few little snippets. On my first evening, I ended up sketching the mountain ridge of the Predigtstuhl. That's the famous mountain right next to the town of Bad Reichenhall, where I was staying. And then throughout the rest of my trip, I sort of would leave places blank in my sketchbook. And that was the case for this lower area. So while I was hiking on the Jena mountain, I had around 20-30 minutes that I decided to take for a lunch break, and I saw this guy sitting up on one of the ridges and decided to sketch him. So, it was just a way to fill this space down here on the left. And then on the lower right-hand side, I did a sketch of an old salt mine in Bad Reichenhall, so the region is known for its salt production. And this was on a rainy day. I found a somewhat dry spot where I could just do this sketch and, just bring in some architecture into this sketchbook. The next set of sketches I did were actually also on a rainy day. That was sort of the thing about Berchtesgaden. You would have a very sunny, beautiful day, and then the day after would be, a bit rainy and a bit cold. So I found quite a nice view despite the rain. Here on the left side, just looking down at the old town of Berchtesgaden. And I probably spent 2 to 2.5 hours on this sketch, which is much longer than I would normally need. But that was mostly due to the fact that I was holding an umbrella, and while sitting down on a little chair was then doing some sketching with my right hand, and of course that slowed me down a bit, but I just really wanted to capture this view into my sketchbook. And since I was only in the region for about a week, my goal really was to fill this accordion sketchbook with 18 pages in total. And the sketch on the right was also a sketch that I did in the town of Berchtesgaden. It was in the marketplace, or Marktplatz in German. And once again here I found quite a dry spot there was like an overhead arch where I, wasn't really going to get too wet. And so I set up my sketching supplies there and then worked on the sketch. And that's sort of the interesting thing about urban sketching, when it's, when you're outside, when you're facing and braving the elements, sometimes the sketching subjects you choose are dependent on where you are and, in this case, where you can find a dry spot to sit. And then the last sketch here in this accordion sketchbook on this side was of the Watzmann mountain. So this is actually quite a famous mountain in Berchtesgaden region. And when I went up to the top of the Jena mountain, like I said, I woke up around 5 a.m. and got the first cable car up and had this beautiful 360-degree alpine view. And it was maybe a 20-minute walk from the cable car station to the top of the Jena mountain. And then once you were at the top of the Jena, you had this beautiful view of the Watzmann right in front of you. And actually here you can see some of the mist and the fog that was still there. And one of the beautiful things was just being able to sketch from the top of a mountain. I had never done that before. And actually down here in the lower left, you normally see the Königssee. That's a very famous alpine lake in Germany, but it was covered up, underneath the clouds, but was still a beautiful view, and I really enjoyed the chance to get to sketch probably from one of the highest altitudes that I've ever done before. So that was this side of the accordion sketchbook. Now I'll flip things around and show you the other side. All right, so now we have the back side of the sketchbook. And once again, this is another sketchbook spread that I did with a few little snippets. The sketch on the left was done in Berchtesgaden on a rainy day, and it was done of a Franciscan monastery, or the Franziskaner Kloster. And, I'm always one for looking for interesting perspectives or interesting layout, and I just really liked the way we had a lot of trees, and then behind the trees you had the church towers or the monastery towers peeking out from behind them. And then once again, for these snippets, I had just sort of left spaces blank in the sketchbook, and I knew I would fill things in as I went along my way, depending on, the color scheme that I came across. And I had done this small sketch of an alpine hut while hiking one of the days, and I still had some space here in the lower right. And this was actually the very last sketch I did in Berchtesgaden. I had about 45 minutes before my train back to Berlin. And so I found this beautiful chapel, once again with the Watzmann mountain right behind it. And I knew that I could get something done in around 40-45 minutes in this small little space. So I quickly set up camp, so to speak, and got my sketching supplies ready to go and did a small little snippet and completed this spread. Here's another sketch I did of the Watzmann mountain. This was actually after coming down from the Jena mountain. I had around 2 hours before my bus back to Bad Reichenhall, and all of a sudden the clouds had gotten a bit cloudy, and all of a sudden they just dissipated. And I thought, well, gee, now I have to really take advantage of this opportunity and sketch the mountains again. And one of the interesting things about doing this trip was that sometimes I'd have a spread like this, or I'd have a sketchbook page like this, where I am being quite detailed, but the mountain vistas aren't as detailed as in some of my other sketches, which you'll see. And that was often dependent on the circumstances. So here, I'd have maybe 2 hours, and I'd be quite tired, and so I wouldn't get as detailed as I normally would. And so it was very interesting for me to compare some of my sketches, and while I am a fan of detail, and while most of these sketches did have a lot of detail to them, that was still something that varied between the sketches depending on the day and, my mood and the circumstances. And so here you can see basically what I'm talking about. This was another mountain ridge of the Untersberg, as I said, on the border between Germany and Austria. And basically for this spread, I did all of these little sketches in one location. They were all done in the town of Marktschellenberg, right on the German-Austrian border, but still in Germany. And after completing this quite detailed mountain ridge, I just decided to stay in the spot that I was sketching at. So I was up right above the town on the side of a little road, and I just sketched the view looking down into the old town of Marktschellenberg. And then to my left I had a few alpine country homes and decided to sketch them too. So once again, just starting with one part of my sketchbook spread, and then just knowing that I'll add little snippets as I go about my day or go about my trip. And this is my last sketchbook page and the last page in this accordion sketchbook. And it's actually one of my favorites just because of the detail, and I really felt like for these sketches I was in my element. So the sketch at the top is actually of a beautiful alpine town called Mariagern, and you have this sort of Bavarian Catholic church, and once again the famous Watzmann mountain vista right behind it. And it was a beautiful morning. I had taken the bus there, and you could start to see the trees change, but not a whole lot yet. And the lighting was perfect, and so I just really enjoyed the opportunity to sketch there and to take in the scenery and just really take my time and, I guess you could say, be one with nature. And then I had some room down here, and I automatically knew I would end up doing a sort of panorama for this part of my sketchbook. And when I went to the Hintersee, which was a lake right behind Ramsau, if you're familiar with this region, I knew that that would be the perfect place to do a panorama and, get some practice again doing water and reflections. So yeah, this was basically my accordion sketchbook from Berchtesgaden. I was really lucky in the fact that I had visited 1 to 2 weeks before COVID-19 cases started to increase in Germany again. And had I done this trip, I think 2 weeks later, it unfortunately would not have been possible, just due to the fact that a lot of regions, including Berchtesgaden, had gone into lockdown again. So it was really a great opportunity for me just to get out, to be alone and to sketch, and to really get a lot of practice doing mountain sketching and nature sketching, and just being able to get away from Berlin for a little bit and enjoy a change of scenery. So I hope you enjoyed this sketchbook tour. It's a bit shorter or a bit smaller from my other sketchbooks, but I thought I would share it with you just because it was a very special trip that I took this year. One of the only big trips that I ended up taking on my own. And I hope you were able to live a bit vicariously through me, and I hope that I brought some inspiration to your day today.